I was turning 30 years old in 1990, and I had been dating John for only about 6 months when I decided to quit my server job that I held for many years, and together he and I became the new owners of Dodies restaurant here in Highland Square. It seems kind of a foolhardy thing to do, but I was young. John, on the other hand, was 47 years old. I'd like to mention also that I'm like 5'2½", and back then I weighed about 120 pounds. John was 6'2" and weighed over 300 pounds. So together we made kind of a motley couple. But you know, that's what I love about Highland Square. It's the fact that no matter who you are, you're accepted, and we were. So for the next 7.5 years that I helped run the restaurant, there were many major events that happened. For example, the sidewalk blew up one morning right after I opened the door for business that day. And then there was the time the President of the United States was in town, and they closed down the square, and Secret Service was all over the place because he was coming down West Market Street in his limo. They were even on top of Highland Towers. Then we were on national television at one time because there was a town hall meeting that took place right in Dodies restaurant, and it was televised live on CBS Morning Show. What a production that was for about 4 minutes worth of television time. Then the Highland Square stalker was on the loose, but thankfully they identified him and arrested him and sent him to jail. But it caused us to have to find another full-time dishwasher. We had our share of employee turnover, just like any restaurant has. We saw lots of people come and go. I'll never forget a nice young lady that I hired who rather nonchalantly told me the first week of work, she said, "Oh yeah, by the way, did I tell you I have MPD?" Yes, she had multiple personality disorder. And no, the other personalities did not come in when she didn't show up for work. But seriously, we had a great group of people that worked with us for many years. And we became like a family together. I eventually learned that it was best to hire people that had a really good heart and had lots of compassion over people that came in and spouted having all kinds of experience. Because I believed it took a lot of compassion and a good heart to deal with our customers who came from all walks of life. We had the movers and shakers in town who ate their oatmeal next to the little old lady, who ordered her eggs next to the 20-somethings that were hungover from drinking at the bucket shop the night before. But our regular customers and our longtime employees, and John and I, we all felt like a family. And that's another thing that I love about Highland Square. The fact that no matter who you are, you can feel like you're part of a family here. So rather than tell you about one of those major events, I would instead like to share with you a small incident, but it's one that's stayed with me all these years, and it involves a regular customer, and I will call him Kenny. And now I think Kenny, I'm not sure, but I think Kenny stayed at the group home down the street. And the group home was a place where men and women with mental and or emotional challenges stayed, and many of them loved to come to Dodies, and they were never discouraged from coming in. As long as they behaved themselves and didn't bother anybody, they were more than welcome. It was the same rule we had for lawyers. Kenny was very slightly built, and he was a little gawky looking because he had thick horn-rimmed glasses. And like many of the group homers, he liked to sit at the counter and drink lots of coffee and smoke lots of cigarettes. And I suspect he had a big crush on Misty, who was a very young, beautiful blonde server, and she had a very good heart. But you know, at one point, it became rather obvious that Kenny was starting to neglect his personal hygiene. And as each day went by, the problem, it was becoming more and more of a problem. And although I hoped today's the day, Kenny's gonna come in and he's gonna have a fresh change of clothes on, it never came to be. And it became obvious that it was an issue needed to be addressed, and being one of the people in charge, it was up to me to address it. So as I was cooking in the kitchen one day, I knew Kenny had come in, even though I hadn't seen him, and decided I just needed to, take care of it quickly. So I left the kitchen, went to him at the counter, and as discreetly as possible, I looked at Kenny and I said, honey, you smell really bad, and you can't come back in here until you go home and get cleaned up. And I can't tell you how terrible I felt when he left that day. And I went back in the kitchen and cried and cooked my orders. And I thought, chances are, well, we're never going to see Kenny again. Well, Kenny did come back in again. And when he came in, his hair was clean and he had fresh clothes on. And as he sat at the counter and Misty poured his coffee and John lit his cigarette, I thought, this is great. We can just forget about it. Water under the bridge, we'll just pretend it never happened. But John came up to the window and he said, Kenny wants to talk to you. Okay, so I again left the kitchen and went to him at the counter and said, hey Kenny, what's up? And he says, Peggy, he says, I want to tell you that I'm sorry, and you're right. I needed to go home and take a bath. And before I could say, listen, don't worry about it, Kenny. It's okay. He said, and I want to tell you something. He said, I want to thank you for caring about me enough to tell me that. So you see, it doesn't matter who you are. You can learn something about what it takes to have real class, like I did that day from Kenny, a guy who had more than his share of challenges to face in life, but he was accepted and part of our family at Dodies. And that's what I love and miss the most about being in Highland Square. And that's my story. Thank you for listening.